Welcome everyone to Zoom into Books this afternoon. We have a special guest, Carl Hare. He is an actor, a director, an award-winning author, a poet, and a playwright. He's had a very illustrious career, and I'd like to welcome Carl to Zoom into Books. Carl, would you like to tell the audience about yourself, please?
All right, I will, yes. I'm from Alberta in Canada, from Edmonton, Alberta. And I went to university there, University of Alberta. Later on, I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. And to give you an idea of that, a year before me, the two who graduated were Peter O'Toole and Albert Finney. And there were three classes at RADA when I was there. And the class behind me, you may know some of these. You may know David Warner, Tom Courtney, people of that kind. Anyway, so it was one of the good schools in England. However, one day we had finished. I'd been in rep, and I was back in London. And I had a motor scooter, and the chairman of the English department at U of A was on the back of my scooter. We were going on a pub crawl for him. I didn't drink, but he did. He was Welsh. He had to drink, of course. And anyway, so in the middle of all this, he said, "You know that your time limit is up for your thesis, for your MA." So I had to go back to Canada because a prairie boy finishes what he starts, right? So I went back to Canada and I finished my thing. I went into a university for a year to teach. And then I started to freelance in Vancouver, in British Columbia in Canada, which I did for a year. And then I had gone, by the way, when I was working on my thesis before, I suddenly got a letter from UVic, from the head of the English department, that they said, "You're hired." This was quite a revelation because I had never applied for it. So I think what happened was that my supervisor and God had sent a brilliant letter to Roger Bishop, who was the head of the department, so brilliant that he immediately wrote, handing me the part. So I went and taught English and philosophy at UVic for a year. And then I went off to RADA. And then I went to do all these other things. And I'm saying that because now here I was in Vancouver, and I was invited back to UVic to start the theater department. So off I went to the theater department. So for 20 years, I was in Victoria, starting in the theater department, directing, acting, going away to act if necessary, and so forth and so on. Until I started a company. I'd gone on leave, and I came back and started a company called Company One Theater. And this lasted for 3 years. It did extremely well. And I was back in Victoria. I was teaching half-time and teaching all time, and teaching and directing all time instead of full time. It's all time for me. Anyway, when I was also in a number of committees. I was on. There was a huge artistic organization that dealt with the arts, and I was on that. And we were at the Governor General's mansion having cocktails when the Director General of the National Theatre School came up to me and said, "We want you to teach at the National Theatre School." I said, "I can't teach at the National Theatre School. I'm a full professor at University of Victoria." So unbeknownst to me, they went behind my back and got an unassisted leave from my chair. So I went to teach at the National Theatre School, which I did for 2 years, and then went back third year to do one project. So, and then back to UVic, and then ultimately I ended up as the chair of the department at the University of Alberta. There were basically two conservatories in Canada, the National Theatre School and the University of Alberta Theatre Department. A number of people have come out of both, and you may have seen them at Stratford, you may have seen them on screen, but that's where I was. Then when I retired, we had 3 children, and there were no children of such in Edmonton. So my wife and I decided, well, we didn't really want to go east where our daughter and my other son, who was an actor, were. But we'd go to Victoria, where, or sorry, to Kelowna, where I am right now. Victoria is always on my mind, as you can see, what's left of it. And not Victoria on my mind. Anyway, so we went to Victoria, went to Kelowna, which is where I am now. And since that time, which is over 20 years now, I've worked with the company here. I've worked with the regional company in Kamloops, and I've done a number of things with the symphony here. And also, so that's what I was doing. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, way back in '93, my son and I were going on a fringe tour. He was acting the 52 parts in the first 2 books of the Iliad that had been translated by a British poet and had been done as a one-man show at the National Theatre in England. So we were taking this on tour, and we got to this is where things become significant, because we actually get down to what we're supposed to talk about, which is my books. It's coming up. And what happened was that we went on a fringe tour. The fringe is very popular in Canada. We got to Winnipeg, which is in the middle of Canada, and a bad thing had happened. I'd run out of science fiction to read. Some people drink. I read science fiction in those days. So I had to go to a bookstore. Now, there's an old bookstore at the edge of the park where the fringe was. This is the kind of bookstore, in fact, it's mentioned in the prologue to the books. Dusty, and the books are piled this way as well as this way. And what do I wondering I should appear but the collected poems of Edmund Spenser? Now, I have an English honors degree, and of course we read in the Elizabethan texts, we read Spenser. I didn't read Spenser as much as perhaps I should have read Spenser. So a 40-year tinge of guilt afflicted me. And I thought, well, maybe I better read The Faerie Queen. So I bought the collected works of Edmund Spenser. And that was fine, and I read The Faerie Queen, and The Faerie Queen is really a very fine work. Then I read his biography. Now, while he was writing The Faerie Queen is an epic that deals with all the virtues, right? So the characters are personified as virtues. As he's writing this about the virtues, he was writing a treatise at the same time advocating the genocide of the Irish by starvation. In essence, it was all of Ireland, because everybody was against the English being there, except the little conclave around Dublin. And this affected me very strongly. I thought, here is one of the great poets in the English language, speaks with the voice of angels. And he is advocating at the same time that he's writing about the virtues. He's advocating genocide simultaneously. What how can someone do that? And so I started thinking about that. And out of that came this trilogy. It's only taken, what's 93, 2003, 2013, 2023, a while. But it was so important a thing that I had to think. It took me 10 years to get there because, first of all, I was still at university. I was still directing and acting. When I retired here for a year, and then they brought me back as acting chair again.
Well, that's amazing, Carl.
Yeah.
I know that.
Now you can go on.
Well, I was going to ask you about the inspiration for your books, but I think you touched on that.
That's it.
And these are amazing books. And we do have the covers that we're going to put up on the screen right now, so the viewers can see your book covers. How has your drama background is so impressive. The names of the actors, of the people you've worked with, are incredible. So, and here are the covers of your amazing books. How did your background in drama play into the writing of these books?
Well, in fact, we had to blame the theater for this. Anyway, at the same time that just before this happened, I was very interested in Ibsen, the Norwegian playwright. Partly because Ibsen was very good, also because my wife is a Norwegian ancestry, so I better do something about Ibsen, right? Anyway, so I explored his life. In fact, I started giving seminars on him, and he had a wonderful wife, and they had nicknames for each other. They called each other the eagle and the tiger. You can imagine the relationship. She was the eagle, he was the tiger. Their more domestic titles were the cat and the bear. And I think you can decide who is which. Anyway, it was an extraordinary relationship between these two. She spent her life making him. He would be to work. He was given 2 hours every morning to work. Nobody was allowed to see him. She fortunately got him to stop painting. He wasn't a very good painter. Not like Strindberg. Strindberg was not a bad painter. Anyway, and they live these lives. And I thought about that and his biography and hers. And I decided I had to write a play about their lives. And I wrote a play called The Eagle and the Tiger. But one of the problems with Ibsen was that for the first, until he was 40, he basically wrote in poetry. And I thought, well, if he does in poetry, I suppose maybe I should write the play about him in poetry. And that's where it all started. You see, the theater is at fault for all this work here, okay? So you do not just write poetry. You have to work at poetry as you do everything else. So I did a huge number of etudes. I worked doing various kinds of poems. I wrote a lot of poems about weddings or other things of this kind on the way. And in fact, I went to a wedding of a relative, and they looked at me and said, "Well, we're looking forward to getting your poem at the end of the service." So, not the service, but the dinner. So that's what I did. I wrote a sonnet on one of the napkins during the dinner and gave it to them afterwards, which meant that somehow along the way I got the habit of writing poetry, which was very fortunate. So when it came to this work, that's what started it off. However, when you ask about the theater, there's a lot to do with regard to theater and this kind of work. First of all, as an actor, I haven't really played that many, 160 roles, and I've directed 80 plays, okay? And 20 of them were Shakespeare, which is good. Anyway, you, as an actor, you have to find the character, understand that character in their background, what they're doing, what impels them to do things, what they are like, what are their habits, where do they live, what do they like. All of these things are necessary. So an actor has to use their imagination to develop this, and then has to find a way to take himself to make that character live. All right? What does a writer do? A writer imagines something and has to find a way to clothe what they see. For example, in Odysseus, two characters emerged that I had no idea would ever be there. There were two women, Pelagia, who actually, if you're going to say it in old Greek, would be Pelagaya, but I like Pelagia, it sounds nicer, and Amunet, who was a Phaeacian slave, although her father had been a doctor. And when these characters emerged from, one emerged from the sack of the town, that she was the daughter of the chieftain, and she was fighting men off with her sword, literally. And Odysseus' son, Telemachus, came along and sent them away, and also fenced with her until she was so exhausted she couldn't go any further, and then he took her away. That was Pelagia. Amunet turned out to be the slave of Helen of Troy. And Helen allowed Amunet to go back with Pelagia, who turned out to have a gift for plants and being a doctor of medicine. And Helen trained her while they were there, and that's what she did when she got back to a long way. By this time, of course, she was Telemachus's concubine, being a slave. Anyway,
Well, all these books, I know it took many years to write these books, and you've talked about the research that you've done. I think you've been working on these books for how long?
30 years.
30 years. So you've worked with an editor over past years. How
Yes.
has that gone? And I know, I mean, you've had such a wonderful career and then became an author using your drama background. I think a lot of the writers who are in potential authors, they'd like to hear maybe about your relationship with your editor. Did you work very closely? I mean, did that go smoothly? Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I think it's been a wonderful experience. Carolyn and I have worked together for 50 years as of this year. She started, she had just graduated from English honors at Victoria, University of Victoria, and she became the dramatist and dramaturg for Company One. And she was the one who found and helped to form the events that we did throughout. She was extremely good. She's been my editor for other things after that. In fact, she's a dramatist and as well as a dramaturg, and she, as was noted in Company One. But I have to tell you this story. I'm not Jewish, but I did a lot of work at the Sadie Bronfman Center. I acted a lot there when I was teaching at the National Theatre School. And Muriel Gold, who was the artistic director, I said, I would like you to make an event out of the book Voices from the Holocaust. This is a book about survivors of the Holocaust who lived in Montreal and who told their tales to this, their stories to this man. I said, well, why do you want me? I'm not Jewish. Why do you want me to do it? She said, because you can be objective. And Carolyn was one really who created the nature of the event. But it was one of the most profound experiences of my life working on that one. And she helped to create that, deeply helped to create that. And since then, of course, I've written books. My first book of poetry, she also edited. And most of the things that I have done, she's edited. Now, when she edits, she's very good and she's very tough. And she will not accept things that do not seem to be right. We have lots of arguments. We do not have quarrels. We have arguments.
That's a good editor.
A brilliant editor. She's a brilliant editor. She has been through, for this, the book 3 has taken the longest. Before I get to book 3, I just have to tell you, by the way, in order to write this, I had assumed that it would canto 1 of one book, the canto 1 of the next book would follow it, and so on and so forth. So in order to write the thing, I had to spend a month writing canto 1 of the first book, the next month canto 1 of the second book, the third month canto 1 of the third book. So the 1, 2, 3, right? And so that the parallels were going on between the 3 books throughout this time. But to do this was an enormous amount of research, if you can imagine, because you have to live in those atmospheres, understand the attitudes, how it works, all those things that go on to make something that's from the past. You have to do the same thing for the present. It's no different for now than from then, really. And Carolyn has helped me in that sense as well as we've worked on this. One of the things that occurs in the third book is that the hero of the book, who the 3 books, by the way, the basic idea are struggles of 3 men as they on the journeys they have to make. Odysseus, who has to fulfill a prophecy that he has to do this as punishment, that one of the gods has done this because he took the eye out of the god's son Cyclops. The second book deals with the whole business of Spenser himself, and the third book deals with this actor-director who we first see traveling across the country with his company, doing a performance of King Lear in Mask. I'm not going to that right now. But what he's going across for is he's collecting materials because he wants to create an event about all of Canadian history. When I say all of Canadian history, it also deals with the First Nations who were here thousands of years before all we were. So he's collecting these materials as he goes along. We get snippets of that as it goes along. And then the second 2, it's Act 1, Act 2, the other 2, we see that event created, performed, and then the following year it's been invited to Ireland. And that brings in things that affect the hero very deeply. So Carolyn had to deal with this guy writing this work about all of Canadian history, traveling across the country, playing in King Lear, doing all these things, right? And she has kept a steady hand on it. I don't want to think about the time she must have been muttering under her breath, or perhaps, shall we say, even something stronger. but she did, and she did a brilliant job. And the book will be published next year, Guernica, in either February, March.
That's great.
And it's all her fault. so there.
Well, it's a wonderful trilogy, and the first two books are out. They're available on Carl's website, carlhare.ca. And for those of you who have joined us late, we're here on Zoom into Books talking with award-winning author Carl Hare about his trilogy. He has two books out, and the third book will be out in early 2022. Is that right, Carl?
That's correct.
Those of you who are watching, if you have any questions for the author, please type them in the Facebook feed or in the chat room in the Zoom room, and we'll get to your questions. Right now, Carl, we have some photos to kind of let people get to know you a little better. If we can get those up on the screen. I'd like for you to tell people briefly about these photos as we go through them.
Okay, these two pictures, the one to the left is a play done in Kamloops. It's a Canadian play, and you'll see me in there. I'm playing a banker. I'm just behind the man in shirt sleeves. That's me behind there. The other one, is when I graduated, I decided to do a tour of Alberta doing puppets. So I got three others together with me, and my father, who ran Northern Nash Limited, was a service manager, sold me a car, and I did it. Whoops, here we go. Whoops. Okay. And so this is on that tour. And that woman that you see behind there eventually became my wife, because I felt if we could actually get along for a whole summer confined in cars, then we probably would be able to make it together. And we did.
That's great. What year did you say that was?
That was 1954.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other one was not 1954. That was about 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at University of Victoria, the studio theater was literally an old Quonset hut. And this was in the summer. I was playing C. Elliot Friday, a Hollywood producer over in the corner there. You may suspect. I am not in those costumes, I want you to know. No, I'm over in the corner being very serious, wondering what on earth they are doing over there that they shouldn't be doing. And on the other side, there I am as a baby with my adopted mother.
And where was that picture taken?
That was taken in Edmonton. Now, there's Company One Theater on the left-hand side, and there are the paper masks that we used at times as well. So there's the company out in the van. On the other side, I'm playing Dr. Faustus in Marlowe's play at the University of Victoria. So those are those two. Now, the one to the left is Zalman or the Madness of God. I do have to tell you a story about that. This was played at the City Bronfman Center. And the play was written by a famous Jewish author, the one who survived the Holocaust, a well-known man whose name has just left me for a minute. Anyway, we were working on the on the play. The day before dress rehearsal, the director and Muriel, the artistic director of the whole place, were not there. We didn't know what happened to them. The next afternoon, the Saturday afternoon, was the dress rehearsal, and they arrived with this guy, and they were sitting up. So we did the play, and at the end, she said, "We'd like to introduce you to the writer of the play." And he looked at us, because you have to understand, first of all, this play was being done on Broadway at the same time. And when he discovered that it was being done here, he was going to stop it. They flew to Toronto, to New York, persuaded him to come and see the show. And he had been sitting there. We had no idea. And at the end of the show, he said, yeah, it's better than the Broadway show. Okay. So I had to tell that story. You don't always have happy endings, you know. But in this case, it worked out. The next one is from Witness for the Prosecution. I was playing the prosecutor. So strangely enough, I was dressed as a lawyer in England. And so I thought, oh, is that it? Oh, I think so.
I think that's a good overview.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. So,
You have to. I have to warn you. Old actors never die. They only reminisce. So that's what's going on.
well, and we love hearing about it. We really do. I know that your books cover 3 eras. How did you come to a decision to write a trilogy covering that much time?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, it was the importance of what happened with Spenser. The idea that here's a man who could talk about the virtues and mean it sincerely. He meant it sincerely, and talk about genocide and mean it sincerely. That's where this all started. So what I was doing during those 10 years when I was a little occupied with other things as well, was I was thinking about what is it that does that? Here we have, in a sense, the whole bifurcation of the human being. On one side, the things we do for each other and help us to be together, whether it's love, whether it's honor, whatever it might be. And on the other side, we will kill, we will murder, we will do all sorts of things. We have these two, we're as if we're bifurcated, right, between the two. And he was such a symbol of this that I thought, this is not unusual. This has happened throughout our entire history. And so I thought, in order to do that, we need to go back 3,000 years at least. And that's where I chose Odysseus. Odysseus' name, by the way, his grandfather was Autolycus, the trickster. And when he saw the baby, he said, well, he should be named Odysseus because that's odium, as I have. It also meant he who inflicts pain or is in pain. And of course you have there. So anyway, that was the idea for that one. Then of course Spenser himself was central. And then why an actor director for the last one? Because there the person is looking at all of our history and the history in Canada. We live in as you do in the United States, in a country that is really deeply stained in blood over its history. And so that was another reason for having what happens in the book. And we also see the First Nations in Canada in the book as well. So that was the reason for the size of this. And how can you do that in that big? Well, an epic has always been the kind of poetic form that deals with the greatest possibilities. We have Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, we have Dante's Divine Comedy, we have the Odyssey, we have the Iliad. These are big works, and the poetry that goes with them has to be the same. So I had to work out the poetry. I had to do the poetry that somehow modernized slightly the poetry of the Iliad, of the Odyssey, of Homer. Use that format, that idiom, but use it as indeed modern translators have, because we don't use a hexameter in English. And then for Spenser, I used his own form, the Spenserian stanza. It's his own. He created it himself. So let's use it. But find a way to modernize it so that it will work for us here. And finally, the modern one, which not only has the modern idiom, but also looks at the idioms of the times in the past when we are talking about them. So that's why that. So now you know.
That's, I also have a question here. Your forthcoming book, the title is Archer.
Yes.
And that will be out in early 2022.
Yeah.
How did you come about for that title?
That's a secret.
Really?
It
So
is.
read the book, we'll find out.
Well, you're beginning to recognize that you never know what I'm going to do, right? Really. Well, one of the things was I like to plant little things in it. I don't know. Well, Carolyn must not tell you, but yes, there are things there. So it's the name is definitely an Easter egg, but there are other Easter eggs in it as well. You know, the Easter eggs in films. Yeah, there are a number of Easter eggs in that one. Let me tell you right now. So no, I won't tell you.
Okay, that's fine. You can keep us guessing. I'm happy with that. I know that your books have won some awards. Would you like to tell us what those are?
They're in competition with what books that are considered to be worth the price. I think in my on my website now there are some quotations from them, which would give you an idea of what it was thought about. So those are the reasons for those. Yeah.
Okay, and had you planned to do a reading today?
Yeah, I can do. Are you okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I thought I understand. I have been thoroughly grilled by Beth about not doing too long ones. Okay, so I've decided I'm doing two brief episodes, one from each. So the first one is from the Odysseus, and it's in Canto 9. We have to understand what the task was for Odysseus before we go any further. Poseidon told him this is what he had to do. He had to carry an oar on his shoulder. He must travel to many cities, and he must find a land that knows no salt. That's not very easy to find a land that knows no salt. Anyway, so he's been traveling with across southern Greece and seeing the old veteran friends, and also being caught up in problems that Orestes has. Now he's gone to northern Greece, near Thessaly, right? Places of that kind. And his ship goes up a river to meet his old war veteran Thoas, now the ruler in Caledon. And Thoas, who's a how can you talk? Okay, he's, shall we say, a wonderfully brutal man and a really good fighter. Let me put it that way. Anyway, they have a banquet, and they're assembled there, and they sit down, and the cups are golden. The objects in the room are absolutely gorgeous. And even the cup he's looking at, and suddenly realizes he actually drank from this cup when he was doing a libation to Priam and Hector, the king and the prince of Troy. He had brought them with him as loot and from other places as well. And so we'll see what that means. Okay. As he waited for a female slave to fill his cup, inadvertently he raised his eyes to hers, looking into large violet eyes that widened as he stared. For he had seen those eyes before and marveled at them. She had been a Trojan gentlewoman renowned for her beauty, married to one of the great warriors in that ill-fated town. Now she was reduced to a slave, and he could see how the 12 years of slavery had left her drawn, although her beauty still showed despite her slave's demeanor. She gasped slightly and almost spilled the wine she poured, but quickly recovered, looking fearfully toward Thoas, and again wore, if strained, the mask of submission. So that's Odysseus. I thought for Spenser, let's not go through the battles. Let's not go through that. There was one time, no matter how much of an enemy your opponent may be, if you're fellow artists, if you're fellow poets, you recognize what's in them. So I thought I'd do something about that. So this is a situation, and it's a very odd situation too. Spenser had an estate given him in Ireland, and beside it was the estate of Lord Roche. Now, Lord Roche had actually been a childhood friend of Queen Elizabeth, and first of all, Spenser hated the old guy always talking about the great old days and things of this kind, but he also wanted the old guy's lands. So he tried to get them. Sometimes he tried to do it by force, didn't work. He tried to get it by courts, didn't work. All right. So this is a situation. Now, he was an administrator, was Spenser as well in his life, and he would attend the sessions, the court sessions in Limerick. And he was on his way back home when a terrible storm took place, just a terrible storm. And he was forced to stop. And where he stopped, he realized was the home of Lord Roche's bard, his poet. And the poet, in fact, lets him in. Now, this is not a very good idea for a bard, because Elizabeth had made a law that you must not meet a bard, and if you do, the bard had to be hanged. However, so he gets in there. He has to get his clothes taken off. He's soaked. He's in front of the roaring fire and everything else. And then he looks on the table, and the bard goes across the table, and he picks up Spenser's book, Shepherd's Calendar, and he reads a passage from it. And suddenly, Spenser realized that he wasn't going to attack him or anything else. He liked his work. And so then this is what happens. This is the bard. He stirs. Perhaps you would hear our own note. I would. He looks to the fire as he begins, and there rises music from his fine throat, fragrant with the rich sounds and disciplines of vowels and syllables in the engine of his native tongue. I know not what he speaks, but the beauty of the alien word wins the heart, and in the music that it seeks penetrates the very soul with all that it reeks. He finishes. It is a lowly thing, but you have no understanding of it. I shake my head. I'll try the words I sing in your own language then, if you'll permit. My love alone doth lie, a gracious country in her scene, with sweet meadows fragrant with flowers and fair grass, with verdant forest rich, delicate gardens bright with bloom, and clear blue pools so deep, and a fine river flowing through that music in its ripples makes. But in that river, currents run below the surface secretly, and in them I may find myself plunged and helpless to escape, and there, in her, drowned. So that's the bard. So two different kinds of
That's
poetry.
that's wonderful. I can tell that these are gripping novels, that's for sure. Um, what do you hope your readers will take away from reading trilogy?
Well, I think a few things. First of all, the characters in it, I think, are, I mean, first of all, in Odysseus, you have his family, Telemachus, his son, his wife, who you remember waited for 10 years for him to get, 20 years actually, 10 on the war, 10 getting back, and waited for him where other things could have happened. Secondly, you have the Menelaus. You have Helen of Troy, right? I almost read you the passage where Odysseus, for the first time, met Helen by herself. She asks him to meet him for a second. You have a lot of those heroes in it, and that's one thing. Secondly, you the writer has the sense of the place, the struggles that go on, the vividness of the things that happen to them, particularly in Odysseus. In Spenser, you have others as well. You have Queen Elizabeth. You have the people, the tenants he has on his flat. You have Shakespeare. There's a scene in it where Shakespeare, Bacon brings Shakespeare and to meet him at the Mermaid up upstairs, before the Mermaid had become a popular place. And while they're talking, in comes Ben Jonson, straight from bricklaying, because that was his job before he started writing. He just had a famous success with his first play, but he wanted to come and meet Shakespeare. Up he comes. So what does he do? He knows Shakespeare doesn't know Latin, so he starts speaking Latin. Now, Bacon and Spenser wrote in Latin as well and spoke Latin, and so they also speak back to him, but they also make sure that that Shakespeare knows what's going on. So you got that set of characters. We actually get a scene that takes place when Shakespeare's play is being done before the Queen in her big hallway. Things of this kind. So you have the vividness of all of these actions and things of this kind. It's not something that none of them are ones in which the character and the action are not shown, rather than trying to make statements about them. They make their own words. And I found as an actor and as a director and as a writer that I'm just putting down what I'm seeing and hearing in my mind, that these things are playing out, and as they go through, they get richer and more deeply said. And then there's the way of finding a way to put it down so people can hear it. All of that's what I try to do. So I think they might find those things interesting. Myself, I don't think you don't have to look at the past and think, oh yeah, no, it's going to be an old history. No. They are all human beings, and the whole point of all of this is that they are like us. and we are like them. And therefore, we have a huge, huge panorama of what we are like as people and the relationships. The
And
relationships of the three of them, I try to hit as many possible relationships we have between ourselves, between men and women, between men and men, between women and women. As we are so multifaceted, multicolored. We are little rainbows in ourselves inside.
well,
I think that it'd be nice if they got those things.
that's what makes good fiction too, when you can personalize it to the reader.
That's
That
right.
that's the key.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree.
we're almost out of time. I'd like to ask you, I know that this last year has been very hard for everyone. How have you fared during the last year? And have you been more creative during the pandemic, or tell us how you got through the year?
Okay, well, first of all, you have to understand, we built an in-law suite on this house because remember, if I said we had to go after I retired somewhere where there were children, right? Because we none of them were in the same city, so we had this. All right. Unfortunately, my wife died a few years ago. But what they have done here is quite wonderful. We can never get close to each other, right? My daughter-in-law gets my groceries in the summer. I have a little deck, right? So on Sundays, they would come out to the table at the deck. I'd be inside at my counter with the screen door between us, and we munch our dinners.
That's nice. That's nice.
Yeah, and that's what is going now. I got my first shot 2 weeks ago. Um, Ruth, my daughter-in-law, got her shot because she works with people that are down and out, things of that kind. Um, and my son is waiting for his, right? And their daughter Rachel, who is a university student, is also on the basketball team, which is not, as you may suspect, having any competitions at the moment.
Right.
Anyway, so so here I am. Now, I have not left this place. I went to an ophthalmologist once. I went to an optometrist once for a year. I have been in this place and nowhere else. We may walk one of Sundays if the weather's good up and down the road. Remember, I'm on the side of a mountain, so it's we have our downs and ups, right? Um, they have taken good care of me, and I finished book 3. Survived that. I write blogs. The blogs, I'm writing a whole set of blogs on self-isolation, which you can see in the other. And I've added pictures and sound because I got an email from someone saying, please, I can't read what you read because I can't see that well. Can you make sound? So I've added sound. So I've done all those things as well. Now that takes a lot of time to do all those things, you know. So I've not really had much. I mean, I'd love to go down and see my friends and things of this kind, but we do try to keep in contact to a certain point. And of course, I've had the problem of the deaths elsewhere. But where I live is so beautiful. I look out this window right now. I look down the lake. The clouds are there. The sun is coming in. The trees. You know, I've written one about the deer that are down below the yard, or the hawks and the eagles. There are a lot of updrafts that come in the middle of the lake, and the birds find them. They never have to flap. They just put them out and they soar and they go up and up and up and up and up until they're tiny. They're loving. They're having a lovely time. They enjoy it. I've watched them several times playing. Eagles playing, hawks playing, ravens going silently over over the balcony, things of this kind. So the trees, we are right on the borderline for the wilderness right here, and so I've never had time to worry about not doing anything.
That's wonderful. I know a lot of people have found their creativity this past year out of necessity.
Yeah.
So are your blogs available on your website?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, and they're also on YouTube. So you can see them anyway. There are a moment. There's a set that dealt with what was like looking outside, and there's a set. Well, a number of sets, but how things become inner. I mean, you're talking to yourself most of the time, right? And so sometimes I now know what an absent-minded professor is. I understand it fully. I mean, you're doing something. Why am I doing that? You're too busy. Your mind is too occupied with other things. You know.
Carl, I want to be sure and let people know that they can get in touch with you through your website.
Yes,
Carl,
there's a space there. The moment the website is being renovated, it's up. But Stephanie is working on my website for me. Stephanie is the other person I work with.
do you do virtual visits? Do you speak to book clubs, libraries? Are you open to those opportunities?
Oh yeah, I'm open for that. Yes, I was supposed to do one a year ago at the in April at the Toronto Library, but no, no. The only ones I've done are the memorials for the two people who died. I've not done any. Oh yes, my family. We're having a virtual birthday party in 10 days.
Well, good. Well, terrific.
Yeah, and then the two girls here. Rachel just had her birthday yesterday, and Ruth gets her birthday after mine. So this is a tumultuous month for birthdays.
Well, it keeps everybody active and busy. That's a good thing.
That's right. That's right.
Carl, I want to thank you so much for coming on to Zoom into Books. This has been an amazing time with you to learn about your career, your books, and I hope that this video will be available on the Zoom into Books Facebook page. If you missed part of it in the coming weeks, it'll also be available on the Zoom into Books YouTube channel. So you have ample opportunity to watch this and get in touch with Carl. His books are available on his website and on Amazon, and watch for that third book coming out in 2022. And I want to thank Beth Warner from Author Connections for bringing Carl to Zoom into Books. It's always a pleasure working with Beth. So thank you, Carl. We want to thank everybody who joined us on Facebook, and we hope to see you again soon.